Hey, now, those were some strong words. 2020 contender Tim Ryan sending a very strong message at yesterday's abortion rights rally outside the Supreme Court. That was just one of nearly 400 rallies held across the nation protesting the recent laws passed to limit access to abortion. 2020 presidential candidate, Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan joins me now. Congressman, those were some powerful words to your fellow lawmakers. We know that today, two other 2020 contenders, Beto O'Rourke and Cory Booker, are out with proposals for how they plan to protect reproductive rights. Do you have a plan?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that, there's only so many ways to do this. But, one of it, and I think the most fundamental thing, we've got to start winning elections, Stephanie. I mean, we're losing elections in these states. Of course, we've got to fund Planned Parenthood. We've got to get rid of the Hyde Amendment. We've got to make sure we invest into women's health care. But the reality is we got to win elections. I mean, we keep playing defense all the time on all of these issues in all of these states and in the federal government. We now have the federal courts peppered with conservative pro-life justices. The Supreme Court is a conservative pro-life court. We've got to start moving in the right direction here politically and getting elected so that we appoint the judges and we win elections in these states. That's the bottom line. And we've got to start connecting with people, working class people, so they vote for us so that we can take care of some of these issues.
You just spent the weekend talking to voters in Iowa. It was not a surprise. They were talking wages, the impact of the tariffs. But they also said mental health is a top issue for them. That was a surprise to me. What's your take?
Every stop I made, I did 6 stops on Saturday, 5 on Sunday, 4 on Monday, and almost every stop people were talking about mental health, the lack of coverage, especially in the rural areas, the teen suicide statistics that came out the other day. Our teens are killing themselves, Stephanie. I mean, this is out of control.
So what are you going to do?
Well, we need coverage. I mean, you got to increase the reimbursements in some of these areas. You need oversight on some of these insurance companies that are literally denying people coverage. You might as well send them to a death sentence because they need treatment and they're not getting it. And there's story after story after story of people then getting denied treatment, going home, and within weeks taking their own lives. It's our veterans, it's our farmers, it's our teenagers. This is out of control. This is a national crisis. We've got to pay attention to it. And the only way to do it is have collective action with the government. We can't cut taxes for the wealthiest people in the country and hope it provides mental health care. We need to be engaged in this process. The president needs to be engaged in this process. The Congress. We've got to fund this stuff or it's not going to get done, and we're going to keep going down this road. People are struggling.
So those people in Iowa are saying they're not getting the coverage they need. There's people in Youngstown, Ohio, that's your hometown, who are saying Democrats don't get them at all. There's a New York Times report out that says in your district, the job situation, it hasn't actually moved since President Trump won. But voters there seem to be sticking with him, and some are even leaving the Democratic Party, even though their situations aren't getting better, because they say Democrats are out of touch with who they are. I want to share a quote where it says the Democratic Party has lost all its voice to speak to people that shower after work and not before work. All we're saying is he won't turn over his tax returns, but he is saying, I'm fighting China to get you better jobs. What do you say to those voters? They're in your district.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a blanket statement for everyone. I think there has been some movement, but the reality of it is if we don't focus on jobs, income insecurity, the mental health issue, health care, education, these bread and butter issues, Stephanie, we're going to have trouble in 2020. I hate to say it because people are struggling. They're not making it. And the president, I think, is making a miscalculation by saying how great the economy is, because it's not. People are barely surviving, and we've got to have an agenda that says, hey, we're going to reinvest back into our communities. We're going to dominate the new economy. We're going to start building things again in the United States. We're going to move from a finance style economy to a manufacturing based economy and the new economy, and put those people back to work. Trump has zero agenda for them. They're not building electric cars. We're not moving to solar or wind. China's kicking our rear end in all of these areas. They dominate almost 40 to 50% of the electric vehicle market, 60% of the solar panel market. So that's Trump's Achilles heel. But we better be talking about it, or
Okay,
those voters are going to default to him.
Let's talk about it, because it's predicted 30 million electric cars will be built in the next 10 years. China is geared up to do it. The president, actually the Department of Energy budget, is zeroing out budgets that would help support manufacturing electric cars here. Tell me about this.
Yeah, he zeroed out a couple of the programs in his budget that would help convert to electric vehicles, that would help us do research and development on the new economy around energy, wind, solar. As you said, 30 million electric vehicles are going to be built somewhere in the world in the next 10 or 11 years. I want them built in the United States. I want those batteries built in the United States.
And you think the president doesn't?
He's not doing anything. He's too distracted. And if you think that we need to move forward on mental health, if you think we need to move forward on building things again, I'm going to ask everyone to go to timryanforamerica.com so that we can build this movement. I want to enroll those people in Youngstown, the people in rural Iowa, Steph. If we can get rural America in the Rust Belt together, we could actually set an agenda for the American people. We've got to start building things. There is an industrial revolution happening in the world. I want America to lead it. Right now, we're playing catch up to China. We got to dominate it and cut the workers in on the deal.
The president and Sarah Sanders like to say that Democrats are distracted by the Mueller report and this talk of impeachment. Democrats are meeting right now to discuss it. What do you think the right move is? Nancy Pelosi's got it on her mind.
I think we need to continue to have hearings. We've got to educate the American people about exactly what's happened. People who watch, MSNBC and Fox, well, not Fox because they don't cover it at all, but MSNBC and CNN, they're following what's going on. But a lot of those people that were in the New York Times article or are working 2 or 3 jobs, are struggling with someone in their family who has a mental illness, they're trying to pay for their kids' college, they're not paying as close of attention to this. So we need to make sure that we are educating the American people as we move forward with hearings. Bring as many people from the administration in front of the Judiciary Committee. Let the American people see what's going on, and then let's see where we are in a few weeks, in a month or 2. But we got to educate the American people. But again, the robust message has got to be around these challenges that people are facing, around mental health, around the tariffs, around getting the new economy going, because they're struggling and they don't have time to pay attention to all this stuff.
I don't know, Congressman. Fox News might not be talking about the investigation, but millions of Fox viewers watched one of your contenders in a town hall the other night, so maybe those viewers care. Thank you so much for joining me, Congressman Tim Ryan, candidate for President of the United States. And Congressman Ryan and all of us are going to be on the road to Miami for the first Democratic candidate debate of the 2020 election next month. You can see it only on MSNBC, NBC, and our partner Telemundo.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.